If you fancy growing your own food this winter but don't have a garden, this week's sponsor has the perfect answer. The iHarvest indoor garden is beautiful enough to display in pride of place in your home and takes up just 2.5 square metres of floor space, so it's compact enough for even the teeniest of apartments and condos. And it's great for the environment too, using 90% less water than traditional gardening and 60% fewer fertilisers than supermarket fruits and veggies. And the iHarvest comes with lights and everything else you need. Just add water and nutrients to watch your farm fresh vegetables grow. Add homegrown greenery and fresh fruit to your diet this winter by pre-ordering the iHarvest now at igworks.com. Grow more with iHarvest. On the Ledge podcast is here again. It's episode 111. This is the show where calling somebody a plant nerd is a massive compliment, and that can only be a good thing. In this week's show, a live recording from Cactusworld Live with plant hunter Tom Hart Dyke and houseplant expert Anne Swithinbank of Gardener's Question Time fame. Plus, I answer a question about Ceropegia seed pods. That's the string of hearts, and blimey, are they some impressive seed pods? Thanks for all the lovely comments about the 2 peperomia episodes. You seem to have really enjoyed those. And if you haven't checked out my Instagram, please do, for a couple of videos showing the peperomia technique for propagation that I've been talking about in the show. It might be useful to have a look at if you can't quite visualise what I'm talking about. And if you haven't joined the Houseplant Fans of On The Ledge Facebook group, please do. It's a lovely, warm, friendly community. No drama, no annoying, spammy people, but more than 1,000 members who are all sharing the houseplant love on there, asking for advice, commiserating when things go wrong, and generally being awesome plant people. There are many awful things on Facebook, but this is one wonderful planty area. So even if you're not a fan of Facebook, do go and take a look at that. But if you're more of a Twitter person, join me at 9 p.m. British Summer Time on Tuesday, October the 8th. That's next Tuesday for Houseplant Hour. Just follow me at Jane Perrone on Twitter or follow at Houseplant Hour. And join us while we shoot the breeze about houseplants for an hour. What could be better? Before we get started on the live recording, I thought I'd bring you a Q&A for this week, which comes from Sarah, who wants to know about the string of hearts and its seed pods. When we're talking about string of hearts, in this case, we're referring to Ceropegia linearis subspecies woodii, also known as hearts on a string, rosary vine, or hearts entangled. And I particularly like that common name because, as anyone who has one of these plants know, trying to untangle them can take quite some time, and I have on occasion just snipped off some in desperation once they've got in a terrible knot. So this is a lovely plant. It's really gorgeous, and it is a succulent because it grows from this tuberous base, which, I mean, if you actually unpot one of these things when it's really got going, you might find actually quite a big handful of these tubers growing in a pot. And to top that, they have these amazing flowers, which, well, they do look a little bit rude if you look at them in a certain way, but the flowers are amazing mainly because they can trap pollinators, tiny flies that pollinate the plants, until the flowers have been pollinated, and then they let the flies go. They're not carnivorous as such. And if that's successful, you may find that your plant ends up with some crazy looking seed pods, which is what's happened to Sarah. She tells me that her plant's been happily growing and flowering all summer, and she's noticed that it's producing seed pods. Now, Sarah, you and I know that it's actually quite a dramatic moment when you notice the seed pods of Ceropegia, because they are, well, they're huge and slightly bizarre looking. They are long and thin and poke out at sort of in a V shape and they're probably about 2 or 3 inches back, I don't know, about 5 to 10 centimetres long. They are massive compared to the flowers or the plant. And Sarah wants to collect the seed for planting, and she wants some advice on how to harvest the seed, and then of course when to sow it, and whether she needs to dry and store the seed before planting. So this is a really great question. There's not a lot of information out there about this subject. I've garnered what I can from my own personal experience and from various BCSS forums and other places. So if anyone knows better than me, then please pipe up. But for the moment, Sarah, here's my advice. Those seed pods, what I would do, if the seed pod is green, that means it's probably not ripe yet. But whatever stage it's at, I would stick a little plastic baggie over it, just so that when it does pop open, you won't lose any seeds, because each individual seed does have a little parachute attached to it. I'll put a link in the show notes to the page on the Pacific Bulb Society where you can see a picture of the seeds. So yeah, to avoid losing those seeds, I would pop a bag over it. I would warn you that I have read varying reports saying that actually you don't get an awful lot of seed from the seed pods, but it's definitely worth a try, and it's a great experiment. So stick the bag over. Once the seed dries out and turns brown and pops open, then these seeds will emerge, and you can carefully remove the seed pod from the plant. And I would sow the seed fresh straight away. The reason being that generally that is the most successful method. The seed dried out is going to take longer to germinate, so go ahead and sow the seed, and I would follow the method that you'd use pretty much for most cacti and succulents. Get a sterile fine seed sowing mix, maybe add in a bit of horticultural sand or perlite just to make it extra free draining. Then sow your seeds on the surface of the damp seed mix and top with a little bit of damp vermiculite, and stick that in a heated propagator ideally, or if not, in a very sunny spot with a clear plastic bag over the top, and wait for germination. If you're wondering why we aren't all sowing Ceropegia seeds, I guess the reason might be that it's very, very easy to propagate in a number of other ways that generally will produce plants more quickly. It's easy enough just to take a section of stem, put it in a glass of water, and it will reasonably quickly. You can also take a length of stem, loop it back over the top of the pot, and use an unfurled paperclip just to peg it down onto the potting mix, and it should root that way. If you find that you have little tiny tubers that emerge on the stems, you can snip those off, push them gently into some potting mix, and you'll find that that will produce a new plant that way. So there's lots of options with Ceropegia, and sowing seed definitely isn't the quickest route. However, you may find that your seedlings are variable in terms of the leaf size and shape and the habit of the plant, so you may end up with an interesting new plant that's different from the parent plant by using the seeds and sowing those. So it's a really interesting experiment. Given that we're moving into the autumn period here in the UK, and possibly where you are, Sarah, you may want to get a grow light if you can onto that pot where your seeds are germinating, just to give the seedlings a really good start. Otherwise, as I say, your very, very sunniest window is probably the best place to start. And if you have a question for On The Ledge, drop me a line to ontheledgepodcast@gmail.com. Regular listeners will know that I love cacti and succulents, and I'm very happy to say that I'm now an ambassador for the British Cactus and Succulent Society, and so it was a real pleasure to go along to their inaugural Cactusworld live event at Lullingstone Castle in Kent. I know I've been banging on about this in the podcast over the last couple of weeks. Let me set the scene for you. You really feel like you are in a rural area when you get to Ainsford, which is the village in which Lullingstone Castle is set. There's a beautiful little bridge over a ford and fields full of Highland cows, weirdly, and horses, and it's just a lovely setting. And then you drive up to Lullingstone Castle and you're presented with this incredible gatehouse which was built in the late 16th century. Well, and that really does look like a castle. The actual manor house itself, it's more giant country house than castle, but it is a beautiful setting. And this is the home of Tom Hart Dyke. who is a patron of the BCSS and a most wonderful person. He is a modern day plant hunter, and you may have heard his story at some point because he was kidnapped by FARC guerrillas while he was in Colombia plant hunting when he was a younger man. And during that time, which was a very stressful few months held in captivity, he came up with the scheme for the World Garden at his home in Lullingstone Castle. And lo and behold, you can go to the castle today and see how it turned out, because he actually made that daydream while he was being held against his will into a reality. And it's arranged like a map of the world, with the plants grouped according to the region of the world that they're from. And of course, that means there are lots of the plants that we love, from orchids and cacti and succulents to begonias, forest cacti, and so much more. So if you ever get the chance to go to Lullingstone Castle, please do take it, because it's a wonderful place. So turning up at Lullingstone Castle, going through the gatehouse on a gorgeously sunny morning a couple of weekends ago, and laid out before me were two marquees where Cactusworld Live was taking place. And even though I arrived just after the doors opened, the place was absolutely buzzing. I hadn't realised that the really serious cactus enthusiasts, they bring along their own plastic trug or plastic tray to put their plants in as they purchase them. So I felt like a bit of an amateur, to be quite honest. But plant sales were very brisk. But the great thing about this particular event was that there was loads to do for families as well. So Chairman Ian Thwaites has really thought about how to attract younger people to the society. So there was face painting, there was a wonderful cactus based coconut shy type thing where you had to knock over models of cacti in order to win cacti, which was absolutely brilliant. And I was delighted to be able to record a live event there and interview both Tom and another patron of the BCSS, Anne Swithinbank. Anne is a regular on the wonderful institution that is Gardener's Question Time, the BBC Radio 4 programme that's run for many, many years. Anne has many books to her name and is a wonderful gardening expert and one of my heroes, so I was a little bit starstruck to meet her and Tom. Now, I should say that this was recorded in a very busy, very noisy marquee, so I hope you can bear with the sound. I've done as much as possible with the help of my sound person, Lisa Hack, thank you Lisa, to make the sound as good as it could possibly be, but there is lots of background noise, so I do hope that you can concentrate on the voices of myself, Tom and Anne, and the background isn't too distracting. But as I say, this was the first year they'd run the event, so we weren't exactly sure how things were going to work out, and I think in future I'd ask to be in a slightly quieter part of the festival, but it was fantastic to be at the heart of the action as well. So I really hope you enjoy listening to this, and you can hear the excitement in my voice. Yes, I get very excited about cacti and succulents. So do have a listen, and if you're inspired to think about joining the BCSS, check out the show notes at the end to find out how.
And I have to admit, my knees have gone a little bit wobbly. It's a good job I'm sitting down, because I'm truly in the company of gardening royalty here. Anne is one of Britain's best known horticulturists, gardening broadcasters and writers. She's a member of the Gardener's Question Time panel for BBC Radio 4, and she's worked at RHS Wisley, and she's written many books, many of which I have, including The Greenhouse Gardener, The Conservatory Gardener, and No Time to Garden, The Half Hour Gardener, which is kind of my style, I have to say. And Tom, what can I say about Tom? He's a horticulturist, author, plant hunter, and his family seat is right here at Lullingstone Castle, and he's the designer of the World Garden of Plants. And I haven't had a chance to look round yet. And in fact, Tom, just to warn you, when you lock the gates tonight, just check that I've gone, because otherwise I might be bedding down with some of those 8,000 plant species. So, what are we going to do today? Well, I wanted to start with a little quiz, just to test the audience and my lovely guests' knowledge. And one of the things I love about cacti and succulents is the names. The common names are crazy, but also the Latin names are fun too. So we're just going to start off with a little test. And we're going to start easy and we're going to get harder. And I'm going to just show these, maybe I'm going to show these to the audience first and see if anyone wants to have a go at some of these names. So if you think you can pronounce this, shout it out, please. Come on. Okay, Tom, would you agree with that? Is that correct?
Absolutely.
And any other?
Wallacei.
Wallacei. There's a
Wallacei,
ER. Yes.
think,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. Let's
Wallacei.
go for another one. Okay. This is a good one. This is a good one. Anyone? Anyone? Come on, front row. Tribnerite. Okay. From the right there. And any advances on that?
Ophthalmophyllum tribnerite.
Excellent, and that's perfect.
Yeah,
Is that good?
Lovely.
Yeah, okay.
100%.
Okay,
Yeah.
It's getting harder now. It's getting harder now. Brace yourselves. I think Colin Walker, the president of the BCSS, should say this one all by himself. Colin.
Weberbaroceras horridispinus.
Excellent! My friend. And that, my friend, is why Colin is the president of the BCSS. Well done, Colin. Okay, let's have a look here. Have we got anyone else who wants to have a go at this one? Come on. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I don't even know how. I like the last bit. Buxbaumianus. That's amazing. Okay, and the last one. Oh no, that's another piece of paper. That was the last one. Well, thank you all so much. Have you got any favourite Latin names, Tom, that really make your heart sing when you see that really long alphabet soup?
I think there are so many. I think it's when they change, Jane, as well. But the cacti and succulents, certainly, there's such a range. I mean, even quite shorter names, Echinocactus husonii, and all these different. And they're often so descriptive, the names as well, when you break them down. They're just absolutely brilliant. Cactus straussii. I mean, you can say it with such passion and enthusiasm, which all the growers do. I just absolutely love it. Welwitschia mirabilis.
I wish you could see this, people at home, but Tom's getting very excited now. And do you ever get tripped up when you're doing Gardener's Question Time and somebody, comes up with a plant and you've got to remember the Latin name? It's a lot of pressure.
It's more a question of just remembering something I've forgotten, sort of old lady syndrome, really. But it usually comes back eventually. Quite often I have to say, I remembered to the chairman, I'll get it back.
And talking about ladies, one of the terms that's very prevalent on social media when we're talking about houseplants these days is the crazy plant lady. And do you like that title, or do you embrace it, or do you feel a little bit strange about it?
No, I've never heard anyone call me crazy plant lady. They try to call me houseplant expert, which is worse. I'd rather be crazy houseplant lady, I think. Wouldn't you?
Yeah. I think so. Tom, I think you're known as the plant nut.
All sorts, Jane. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you were wearing your sombrero earlier. You are
the
wearing
ponchos.
The poncho is it does give you a slight air of nuttiness.
But it's that enthusiasm and passion that everyone in this marquee, everyone at Lullington today, has got for the world of plants that just shines through, and it's just such a leveller of everything, and it's just so wonderful, and especially when you're interested in this particular range of plant that's so diverse. It's just brilliant. So yeah, I get called all sorts.
And what is it about cacti succulents you think that produces such, well, can I call it mania in some people? Why are we so fascinated by these plants?
Sheer diversity. It's the sheer, in my view here, with the small collection, but relative to a lot of the growers here today that we've got at Lullington. I mean, it's that sheer diversity, from Mexico through to South Africa, through to Asia. Succulents and cacti grow absolutely everywhere, excluding Antarctica. And there are just such a huge range. But what people don't realise is that almost all of them come from the Americas and the Caribbean and the islands either side to Galapagos. There's a couple of disputed cases, perhaps there's a Ripsalis from Madagascar, but otherwise there are no cacti from Africa. There are usually euphorbias, which look like cacti with that milky sap they produce. These candelabra structures up to 45 foot tall, Jane, and being in the privilege of going to some of these places and seeing them in the wild, I was always going to have an interest. They're so aristocratic, they're so imposing, but it is that diversity. The range from something that's almost subterranean for most of its life, 15,000 feet in the Andes of Peru, it flowers just about above ground level, to things that are 40, 50 foot tall and over 1,000 years of age. And the colours, calm down.
It's okay.
The colours of the flowers. I mean, would you expect them to be brighter orange than this microphone top? I mean, the fluorescent pinks, the iridescent greens, and they're often massive flowers that cover the whole body of the cactus when they're out. It's a superb family to be enjoyed.
And tell me a bit about your own plant collection. Like me, I imagine it's a constant temptation to buy more plants. But do you have any plants that you've had for a really long time that are really precious to you?
I do, but I mean, just looking around here at the sheer variation of plants on sale, to the side of us, the tables, 3 long trestles, absolutely full of plants which you can buy, and my eye keeps sliding across.
No, it's terrible.
And the amount of variety that can actually be called a succulent is quite amazing, isn't it? I can see Tradescanthia scillamontana, and you think, yeah, that's not what you think of as a succulent, but it is succulent. And an amazing climbery thing with bright sort of orange-red flowers there, which looks as if it could be a tweedia or something like that. And I'm desperate to get over there and investigate. But you did ask me about my own collection. They might be in it soon. I have got plants that go back to when I was a child, really. And some of them haven't grown as much as you would think they should have done because I haven't potted them on as much as I should. And that's, I think, the problem with literally growing on the ledge. There is a limit to how much space these things can take up in a house, but they still look pretty good, even though they're smaller. You know, things like a kind of Cactus grusonii. No, a plant that I've had for say 30 years is still only about. I'm making a shape with my hands here. It's about 8 inches across. It should be massive, shouldn't it, if it was planted out somewhere? But by the same token, I've got such an eclectic collection. They're all over the place. Some are outdoors. I've still got Kalanchoe thirstiflora outside. That's the paddle plant. That will have to come in very soon. Doesn't like the cold. So yeah, loads of them.
We are at that dangerous time of year when those of us who do have cacti and succulents outside are getting very scared and very concerned that our family are going to start noticing quite how many plants we have that need to come inside.
And I haven't even mentioned South African bulbs because that's another passion.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah.
Hemaphus, they've all got to come in the porch as well.
Yeah, it's a big job at this time of year, unless you happen to be Tom, and of course you have this amazing. Are there any plants that are you looking around here thinking, oh, I want one of those? Are there still plants you want to get hold of?
Jane, there's one reason why I haven't been in the marquee until now today, because that should answer it.
Okay.
Absolutely. There's always something, and everyone says, I've got no space. You make space, don't you? You always make space for it.
You can get bowls and shove several
Of course
succulents in
you
one
can.
bowl. Yes.
Absolutely.
There's
But-
even a tombola. Have you seen the tombola?
very funny.
I must go and have a go on that. You can win succulents on the tombola and pick them.
That's the
quite
best
fun.
prize of all, isn't it? How could you top that? That's
But
brilliant.
Jane, what Anne was saying, it's interesting about things in containers. What we've been so lucky at Lullingstone is with a bit of space in quite a large polytunnel we've got here, is they're undercover, yes, but they're in the ground. And as Anne was alluding to, the minute they're in the ground, it changes the perception of a cactus succulent and their allies. Bang! The growth rate is absolutely incessant. I mean, we've got a euphorbia putting on, big candelabra euphorbia, putting on 5.5 foot a year. And it is from seed just 9-10 years ago, and it's pushing up the plastic now, 16 foot of it. So we cut a metre off a year with a very sharp blade. It's not what you perhaps imagine when you see them in the pot. You know, you can feed them, and yes, you can pot up to a degree, but how heavy do the pots get? Lugging these things around. It honestly, when they're in the ground, if you can do it, incredible.
What's your tip for repotting? Because I've heard every possible sort of Heath Robinson technique for repotting a spiny cactus or an opuntia with those little tiny spines that like to stick in your fingers. What is your tried and tested, gold standard, will not get a spike in my hand method for repotting?
Don't do
moving?
it. Don't do it. No,
that's good.
Honestly, the scars. I mean, look at that one. That went right in yesterday. That's a fantastic scar there. Anyway, no, what I do, thick pair of gloves, leather if possible, because the glock is the small little fine hairs. They're so deceiving, and that you don't feel they go in, and 3 or 4 days later you've still got them. To avoid that, thick gloves. But with most cacti, if you can lift it, if it's not too heavy, being very careful, it probably won't go down very well. Turn the whole thing upside down, making sure you've got a bit of the pot and a bit of the compost to grip on. Force the thing out. Put a bit of bubble wrap on the floor in case you drop it. If you try, Jane, depending what variety it is, try and grab it at the top. They may be aggressive and spiny, but they're so vulnerable. They're quite often easy to break and snap. If you drop it, it'll almost just, like a watermelon, explode on the floor. So I just turn it upside down and just force it out of the pot. And then you've got hold of the root ball with hopefully a bit of compost you might tease off and repot it into something slightly larger. And just don't drop it.
Well,
Very professional, though.
we've all been there. I mean, I did actually have put on my Instagram a while ago my beautiful string of pearls, which I managed to knock off a very high shelf, smashed all over the floor. It's fine, but it is a traumatic moment when it all lands on the floor, particularly as most of mine are in terracotta pots.
It's the noise.
It's horrible. Also, controversy such as there is within the BCSS seems to mainly extend to pots, terracotta or plastic, and also top dressing. This is a very controversial issue. Do you top dress, and what do you top dress with? Can I have both of your, chapter and verse? What would you do? What do you like to see your cacti and succulent planted in, and do you top dress them with any grit or anything?
Oh, so you want compost as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Give me the whole process.
I usually use John Innes number 2 mixed equally with a soilless compost to give a little bit of body to it, and then I'll add about sort of half a gain of really good grit or more, depending on the cactus or succulent. And then when I potted it, and I'll sometimes use the pot as a template method, which is another good one. So having extracted the plant from its pot, you then pot the pot and then you slide carefully the cactus in, because otherwise you often can't get your fingers underneath the body of it with the spines. And then I'll top with either a good potting grit, and finding good potting grit is really difficult, of the right size and grittiness, because quite often you go and it's too small a size and you're faced with a choice between something that's like a too small grit and a great shingly grit, and you want something in between. So I'll either use the sharp grit or a small shingle, whichever looks best. And then, of course, if I'm doing an arrangement in a bowl with several, or I've got lithops, this pebble cacti, I'll often find some stones that are compatible and sort of that make a little stone formation, rock formation to go with them.
That sounds lovely. Tom, anything to add to that?
Jane, similar to Anne with the containers, a similar thing, a bit of perlite occasionally, the grade, yes, as small as possible with some of the stones, especially some of the cacti, they get so unstable in the pot sometimes, so when they really root into a smaller mixture that's free draining, great. However, as I've said, most of the ones that we've got, we're so lucky to have them planted out, and all we've used is builder's ballast with grit and sand in it, mixed in a cement mix at 18.5 tons of it, with no cement obviously, with a 3-to-1 mix of a certain type of multi-purpose compost, and use that as the base. And they are in the ground, so that wouldn't suit a lot of plants. It's quite alkaline, the sand builds, quite alkaline usually, but in the ground you've got so much more margin for error of things like salt builds up on the roots if it's in a container, and then some cacti don't like that. We don't use any rainwater for the cacti. It's liquid chalk from great granddad's aquifer, chalk aquifer he's got at the back he put in, and it's 12 or so on the pH. It's just so hard, the tap water. But they look all right. You get a bit of calcium deposits on the sides of the stems, but as they're in the ground, I think I'm getting away with a lot more. In containers, I do use rainwater for the containers that we've got, because they would struggle, I think, long term. But
how long do you leave your newly potted cacti before you water them in? Because that's another issue, isn't it?
it is, Anne. Straight away.
Do you?
I do.
I usually leave mine a few days, so any broken bits can sort of heal up and dry off.
That's what I do, Anne. Yeah, that's exactly what I do.
I think I was taught that
that's-
by someone in the British Cactus and Succulent
Therefore,
Society.
everyone's looking at me here. That's exactly what I do.
But I think that's the amazing thing, is that lots of people have their own tried and tested techniques for things, and if it works for you and your plants are healthy and happy, then it's working for your conditions and your setup, so don't feel like you have to adapt to somebody else's ways. I'm interested about the idea of having cacti and succulents, some cacti and succulents as growing outdoors in a bed. Can you give us a few tips on what kind of things can survive outside in the British climate?
It's surprising, Jane. I would have to say here, you may not feel like it today at 27 degrees or something amazing. We're in quite a cold dip here. It's a small valley, but that cold air sinks. And in the walled area over there where the garden is, it doubles the cold. The wall keeps the cold, magnifies it. So we've got a big Mexican section outside with lots of cacti, especially prickly pears, and lots of succulents. So lots of agaves, the dasylyrions, and so on. The nolinas are doing well. We cover the whole lot, 55 foot long, 23 foot wide, and 11 foot tall, with a temporary polytunnel in the winter. So in my view, to actually answer your question, every type, some will disagree here, a lot will, from reading the journal, a lot will. that basically without a layer of plastic, or if you're doing it small scale, bit of glass raised up on bricks to cover them in the winter at Lullingston, almost every winter except last winter, they'd be either dead or damaged enough to look rubbish in spring because they take a while perhaps to recover. But with that quite a big structure, every year put up with concrete foundations in the ground. I know this isn't practical for everybody. Obviously, it's a lot of work, but there's hardly any damage. Now, the agaves are frozen solid in the winter. You see the icicles pouring out of the leaves. The pretty pears are frozen solid. There's hardly any difference in temperature underneath that polytunnel. It's not heated than outside, but they're dry. At the root, the crown. They can be frozen for 3 or 4 weeks, like in 2010-11 winter, unmarked, and a lot of them try and choose one that come from cold areas.
Well, that's fascinating to hear. I mean, I think it's a great idea to experiment, and that's
exactly.
And again, it might work, and the dryness is the key. My agaves are in an unheated greenhouse and just totally dry, and they seem to be fine as well. And I really don't know what I'm doing with agaves, so they must be easy. And I hate to bring up the subject of pests, but this is one of the questions I get a lot on the Ledge podcast about. What's this strange fluff on my cactus? What happens when a mealybug makes itself known in your collection? What aside from scorching it all with fire? What is the ultimate mealybug solution? Is there one?
Yes, there is. 2 things have happened. So once a mealybug infestation took hold to such an extent that I actually threw all the plants away and started again. And what I'd done wrong was I didn't quarantine a plant that I brought in. It was downstairs and my Stropeliads were upstairs. And it was a no-liner. And I didn't realise, ponytail palm, I didn't realise that it had mealybug on its fleshy roots just under the surface of the compost. And it must have travelled up in the air currents, got on them all. I was busy and I just thought, I can't have this spreading any further, I'll get rid of them and start again. But elsewhere in the establishment, on a lesser scale, I had a Hoya. I still have it. Beautiful variegated Hoya. And I really love Hoyas. That started mealybug almost as soon as I bought it. And I controlled it by squirting it with SB plant invigorator. And so do it one day to really get through the sort of waxy coating of the bug, and then the next day to sort of kill it off more, and then a week later, and then eventually it went. It tried to come back a couple of times, but I zapped it again and off it went. And that's a fairly non-toxic pesticide to use. I think that's what I did.
I think once you start spending any excess money you've got on SB Plant Invigorator, you've truly made it as somebody who collects plants, because this seems to be the thing that lots of people are buying to deal with pests. Tom, any other mealybug suggestions?
We've got quite a bit of mealybug, and you're absolutely right. You've really got to watch the plants from wherever it is. Garden centres, just 1 or 2 with a mealybug. All we use, this is going to sound a bit odd, garden hose. Now, they haven't got wings, so they really get stressed out, you soaking them. And I know this, soaking, but with the hose, making them physically leave. What really is tricky, I find, is, especially with things like prickly pears, when the flowers are finished, I can't see any around, you take the old flower head off to reveal this indented cup full of these mealybugs. You've just got to... I was doing it yesterday, because of today, with minor mealybug infestations at Lullingston. Minor we've got. I was doing it yesterday just to make sure none for people to see today, and I was getting the garden hose and squirting them off. Of course they'll get their feet and come back up, but they get really stressed out, and that's all I've done over the years. Perhaps not spray make work or spray, but a garden hose with black fly on dahlias, squirt that they very rarely will come back that same dahlia. They get all exhausted and they can't be bothered to climb up the plant again.
That is the stuff of nightmares. A puntier filled with me. I am actually going to have a nightmare. I am going to have a nightmare about that as well. That sounds absolutely horrific.
I think root mealybug are even worse.
Yes,
even worse than the top mealybug. I hate them.
Yeah, we're getting a nice level of mealybug hate here, which I'm enjoying. Any other pests that cacti succulents other than mealybug? Are there any other pests that you have problems with? Any sort of bigger animals here? Do you get rabbits or any deer or anything coming in and having a nibble?
No, I tell you the worst that beats mealybug. Unbelievable when you see in the morning just a pile of spines from your favourite Apuntia faircantha from Apache Trail, Arizona. Mollusks. destroyed. Whole pads are just taken out by snails. Slugs aren't eat the snails, and they'll eat through the prickly pear and fall out the other end. You're left with this sort of 50p piece, and you know for the rest of its life that particular pad, which can last obviously for years, it will try and callus over, but you've usually got holes in it. I say it's a rare species with holes in it. And it's just a nightmare. Mollusks. Now, most people might be quite surprised. Perhaps you'd say scale, Tom, or you'd say a rogue deer, but no, it's snails. And maybe don't expect that with a prickly pear, which is so well armed usually. And you're left with their spines in the morning and the whole pad split into two, and you're just... But stamping them and that pressure point on your foot, so satisfying.
Yeah, I've done that a few times wearing slippers or indeed barefoot going outside, which
Barefoot.
is, it's not, yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but sometimes I'll wander from house to office, you know, for some particularly domestic reason, nothing to do with my plants. And then 2 hours later, my husband will come out and go, "Dear, you're just going to get that stapler? You haven't reappeared?" And it's me just, you know, I'm repotting something by that time.
Trail all over the house.
Exactly. Yeah, it happens all the time. And I think with these problems that we get with pests, I guess it makes us, it's a journey we're on, isn't it? In a way, the more we learn about these pests, the more we learn about our plants. We've got to take the rough with the smooth, though, haven't we? Things go wrong. Plants don't always survive. I always like to say that, you know, killing a few plants is a journey of discovery towards understanding more. So we always try to be positive about plants dying for various reasons. Although I can imagine, the hatred for the snails is understandable. Now, I try as much as possible to buy from lovely independent nurseries like the ones we've got here today, but very occasionally I do find myself... I have an incident. I was in Lidl the other day, and I think I was buying cheap Prosecco and brioche burger buns or something. And, there was a plant that literally, well, not literally, but it called out to me across the store. And it was just on its own, on a shelf, and I literally ran towards it, throwing old ladies and small children out of the way to get to it, because I thought somebody's going to have it before me. And when I got to it, I thought, yes, it is. I've got to have this plant. It was the propeller plant, Crassula falcata, and it was just so perfect. And I would generally tend not to buy plants in Lidl, but I just thought I've got to have that plant. Now, I'd love to know from you guys, what is it that you're looking for when you're choosing to add a new plant to your collection? Is it, like me, totally irrational, but just something gut? Or is there particular qualities that you're looking for in a new plant?
Completely irrational. Window shopping, always. Yeah. Especially with cacti and succulents.
Yeah, but I guess... But Tom, have you got kind of a completist spirit? Do you need to have every cultivar in a particular species or genus, or are you just...
Rational random behaviour, Jane.
Yeah, okay.
But I have to say, I try now, I'm quite disciplined. You go in with a bit of a list. That'd be quite nice, that'd be quite nice. And you see to my left here, and you just fall apart. The list isn't on you anymore. You've dropped it down somewhere, and you're just getting things that you've never heard of. And but there is a gut thing with it. I think there is something telling you that perhaps it's just whatever. You just have to have it.
And I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the show plants here today. Have you ever gone down that route and tried showing plants at a BCSS event or anywhere else?
I wouldn't be good enough. I don't think I'll be good enough. Not to the standard today. And as I say, a lot are in the ground, but the containers that we have got of things, I could give it a go, but I'd be rubbish.
What about you, Anne? Is it ever...
When I was about 8, I used to the local allotment society show, we enter your 3 cacti. I used to do that all the time and win.
That's good. Wow, there you go.
But the standard wasn't as high as this, obviously.
What do you think the BCSS can do to attract a new generation of people into succulents and cacti? Obviously, this event is part of that, but is there more that we can do to excite younger people about these plants?
I think they're excited. They possibly just don't realise the society exists. And also, I don't know the depth of knowledge that's caught up in the society. If you go, if you actually go to one of the big meetings, the big sales or the shows or where speakers are coming from all over the world, and you speak to people with thousands of plants in their collections, and you realise to what extent they've travelled and looked at plants in their wild environments and gone back and compared, whether they're still there and are they threatened. The depth of knowledge is just amazing. So, you think you can start with a small collection on a windowsill, and you might end up one day being a very, very knowledgeable expert in cacti.
Well, that is the hope. That is the hope. And I get a lot of questions on the show about cacti and succulents, and obviously on Gardener's Question Time, and I'm sure here at Lullingstone you get asked lots of questions. What are the most common things that people ask about when it comes to cacti and succulents? Those kind of eternal questions, or the sad plant that turns up for you to look at. What do you get asked?
It seems to be the etiolated cactus, the one that's not had enough light. It's, I don't know, it's just been kept in a very warm room all the way through its life. It might have been kept in an office, and so it's gone lanky and it's grown on and on and on, and it's sort of toppling and nobody knows what to do with it. That seems to come up time and time again. And it is almost always offices rather than houses where these are the problem. And really all you can say is that, you perhaps prune it down and make some new babies, and then put it somewhere on a cooler windowsill.
Yeah, that does seem to be a very common question. The most depressing of all I find is when it's a picture of a cactus which is literally a pile of mush, and the person's saying, "What can I do to save it?" And you're thinking, "Nothing. Put it on the compost heap." That is a depressing scenario, and I guess this comes from, now that we can buy cacti and succulents so widely, they don't always come with good sets of information. I mean, somebody posted something online the other day. I think it was a supermarket label, and it sort of said something like, foliage, this was a cactus of some kind, foliage plant, keep warm and water daily. And you just thought, that's not going to go well. That's not going to end nicely. I mean, what can we do to help people to get more information about cacti and succulents? Is there a way that we can reach out to people? Is it social media?
By doing this, joining be a member of the BCSS and joining in and getting stuck in. As Anne said, you just enter a world that you'll never leave. It's just unbelievable. And when a kid, you see it so much here, the youngster on their mobile or whatever it is, playing the games around the garden, the parents are into the plants, they come in to see little cactus collection we've got at Lullingstone, let alone here today, and they're entranced, and they buy one, and that to me is such a rewarding thing. They've never had a plant before in their lives. There's something about a cactus. There's a real, kids, however much they've got on their computer games now, whatever it is, the image, etc., a cactus still has that appeal to override it. And once they start, they're in and they'll never look back. And I've seen kids come out year after year here with more and more collections, and you've seen them getting madder and madder.
And they'll still have them 20 years later.
And they'll still have them,
My son's 25, and he's still got cacti on his old bedroom windowsill, which we have to look after, that he still loves dearly. And, but he doesn't take them with him, he just leaves them behind, and we have to look after them. But there we are.
And the other thing as well, which Anne was mentioning a bit earlier, but was also issues with cacti. What's the biggest thing? Something that hasn't worked out. They come and bring a cactus that's half, dead or whatever it is. Oh, it said on the label, rather than water too much, don't water at all, just leave it on the windowsill. They need more water than you might think, a lot of these plants, especially during the growing season. And people often come to me, actually not so much with the overwatering, which can be the case so much with house plants, but just no water. We bought it a year ago, Tom, we haven't watered yet, what should we do? And there's this cactus that's never going to come back. So water a bit more, that's the biggest thing we get from that stat. But once you get them enthused, they're in there.
Yeah, but to get the cacti to show standard, that is what's important, isn't it? Is keeping them growing steadily, so they don't have fits and bursts and get these sort of wastes around them, and then they go again and they get a sort of a bulge, and then they get a little bit scorched and dry, and they have a sort of a scar on them, and they become slightly uglier. They've got good character, but they were getting a bit ugly and sort of certainly not showable.
It's an art. It is an art to this standard. It's all year round attention. The image of a cactus, just leave it. Obviously, this is a very high standard.
They'll stay alive, but they won't look great.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And has some of you've travelled around the world looking at plants. You're fairly famous for that, shall we say? You're notorious for it, could we say? Has your experience of seeing cacti and succulents in the wild inspired you in the way you grow them in your own home and just made you... is that important, the fact that you can see how these plants actually grow in their own environment?
Critical. Absolutely critical. You can go on Google all you want. BCSS are fantastic. You can read all their journals and publications that you want and everything. But you can't beat seeing something in the wild to improve your husbandry back home. The soil it's growing in, the aspect. Some cacti, a lot of them burn in our sunlight. I mean, they're often under the shade of a shrub or subterranean. You think of cacti burning in the sun, almost doesn't make any sense. But seeing them in the wild to improve your conditions back home, it is so important, Jane, and that's what I've really drawn from travelling. For example, as we're celebrating a lot of the Mexican plants today, going to Mexico 20 years ago now to see them in the wild, whatever it might be. Across to salvias and penstemons, whatever it is, all the plants there, seeing them in the wild, so important. That your learning curve is absolutely huge, really important.
And have you had a chance to visit any places where you've seen cacti and succulents in the wild?
Not very much. I have been to Arizona and seen a few, but I was very young and didn't really know what I was looking at so much then. And I have been to South Africa, but not the places where lots of succulents were growing, so sort of accompanying a tour. But I was on the train on the way here. I was just looking up about Francis Masson, who obviously collected loads of succulents back in the 1700s, and talking about Latin, he wrote really well actually about, you can read it online, about how he felt about collecting plants, in from the wild in South Africa. But then when he goes on to describe them, it's all in Latin, all of it, all of the description, because that's what they did in those days. But yeah, I would love to follow in some of his footsteps. He collected a lot of stapeliads, didn't he, and wrote a book about them. Yeah, very interesting.
Excuse me.
History, I think history and geography are two really good topics that come with the cacti, aren't they? And it's not just the plants themselves. You get totally involved with where they've come from and who collected them, and the stories and histories surrounding them.
And last question for you guys before I throw it out to the audience. Do you give cacti and succulents names? Do any of your prize specimens have a name? And I'm noticing this more and more, that I'll get an email from somebody and they'll say, Jason, my Euphorbia millii is suffering from mealybug. And I think, Jason, how did you choose that name? Is this something that's happening in your life, or is this...
No, I did used to call all my handbags George, but I have not called my houseplants anything, but I tend to just call them you. So you're doing really well. You flowered. So I sort of pat them and talk to them and call them you. But
See,
I
it's
don't
funny,
give them names.
I don't talk to my houseplants, but I do talk to the pests. When I see a pest, I'm like, I just can't believe... Yeah, so I talk to the pests, not the plants. What about you, Tom? Any names?
Not really. I think you've just got to go online, or just some of the common names for cacti and succulents are hilariously comical, and you can draw on the wealth of the names, the common names for one plant can be called, same Latin name, but 100 different common names, and choose the funniest, most applicable one to the shape of it or whatever. That's all I need to do. Yeah, you don't need a George or a Phil or a Bob, because the common names are hilarious.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'd love to hear from the people in the audience. If you've got any questions for Tom or myself, then I would love to you to put your hands up, and we'll try to get to you with the microphone. Anyone got a question?
Lawrence put his hand up.
Come on, there must be a question from somebody. We've got the patrons of the BCSS here. Let's have a question. Thank you. Let's just get the microphone over to you.
Thank you. I've just tried germinating cactus seeds for the first time ever, and I've sown them way too densely. So they're about 2 millimetres across, but I've got hundreds of them, and even at that size, there's no soil visible. What am I going to do? I can't bear to kill them, but they're obviously need thinning out, but I'm worried about disturbing the roots of the ones I leave behind.
When did you sow them? In the spring? This spring?
No, about a month ago.
Okay. Any suggestions?
Well, yeah, because usually you would leave them about a year so they could put down more of a root before you disturb them. If you've got literally hundreds, I think I would thin them out. And how you feel about getting rid of the ones you're thinning, I'm not sure. You might as well try potting them. Why not? Nothing to lose. Yeah, you're going to have hundreds and hundreds of them. You could go into business.
Yeah, does anyone want to buy any gymnocalcium?
Yes, lovely. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Any more questions? Things that you've been longing to ask Tom and Anne? I can't believe we've got no more questions from the audience. I'm very disappointed. It's hot. It is hot in here. It's very, very hot in here. Well, I have got one last challenge, actually, which perhaps we can do. I'm just going to come off the stage. Hang on. Slight break while I stumble. Okay. I wasn't sure whether I was going to do this with Tom and Anne or with a member of the audience. Is anyone feeling brave and want to win themselves a bit of on the ledge merchandise? I have a lovely drawstring bag and mouse mat for somebody who wants to have a go at this little challenge. Yes. Okay, good. Right. I'm not going to blindfold you because that would be a bit weird, but I'm just going to ask you to shut your eyes and I'm going to hand you a cactus or a succulent. I can guarantee that it's not spiny, it's not going to hurt you, but I want you to have a go at identifying it. Okay? So this is a little challenge. Other members of the audience, you can give her clues if she's struggling, but give her a chance. Okay, so no, nothing. Okay. Hang on. This is the first one coming out now. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
You're putting it in your hands.
Okay,
and you can just touch it. Yeah, it's not going to hurt you. So, audience members, remain silent for the moment. She looks like she might know something here.
I know this one. My neighbour's got one, but I don't know the name of it.
Okay, any clues? Anyone give a clue? Can we have some clues? What about
Epiphytic.
It's an epiphyte.
I really can't remember the name. I'm so sorry.
There is a common name.
Okay, does anyone else? Can anyone else?
It's called a cactus, isn't it? It's
Anyone
called,
got a...
There is a common name.
maybe cactus.
Yeah, there's a common name of this cactus. It's like an ocean. What's in the ocean? What do you put in the ocean? No, what's swimming in the ocean?
Fish.
Yeah.
That's a fish cactus, is it? Fishbone cactus. Fishbone cactus.
Well done. So yes, epiphyllum and gulaga. That was quite tricky. I don't know whether I started on a really hard one there. Okay, we're going to have a couple more. Okay. Are your eyes closed? Are your eyes closed? Okay. Here we go. Number 2. It's slightly spiky, but it's not too bad.
Okay.
Have a good feel. You never thought you'd be doing this, feeling up a succulent in the marquee. It's a good guess, but it's not right.
Like avoides?
No, it's a good guess though. Anyone going to give
Can
a
I
clue?
give her clue?
Yeah, give a clue.
You were looking at these ones. No, you were looking at these ones.
Yes, well done. That's excellent. Okay, I'm going to have one last go before we go. Maybe I'll get. Actually, I'm going to give you a break now. You can open your eyes now. Well done. And do get your own bag of mouse mat.
Thank you.
I'm going to get a couple now. Okay. Right, close your eyes, panel. Close your eyes. Okay. Yeah. Tom's going to do this one. Okay. There you go. Yes, that's the label. That's not helpful. I'm not looking for a species, I'm looking for a genus, okay?
Lovophora.
Close?
Gasteria.
Close?
Haworthia.
Yes!
Yeah.
Well done!
That was before. Oh yeah, that's a lovely one. That's before Graham said it.
That's from my own collection there, so there
Very
you go.
nice.
Admire that. This came all the way from the US. Somebody, a kind listener, sent this to me because I have such lovely listeners. Okay, one for Anne now, last one. Okay. Are you ready?
I am, eyes are closed.
Okay, I don't know if this is going to be easy or not. I'm just going to show this to the audience before I... If you know what it is, don't shout out. Okay, Anne, you can have a little feel of this one.
No, it does feel like Aeonian. No.
Okay. Any clues from the audience here? How can we help out?
Cotyledon. No.
South African?
South African. Yeah.
Okay.
Ooh.
It is in a fancy pot.
Yeah, I can feel the fancy pot. That felt
This
really
plant may
weird.
have been mentioned already.
Yeah, it's Kalankoe. Is it Kalankoe?
It's closed. Colin Walker saying you're close, Anne. Should we put you out of your misery?
Yeah, go on.
Open your eyes, Anne.
Oh.
It's my passion falcata.
I'm worried now. I've taken all the bloom off its leaves.
Don't worry. I do have a few stunt plants that I tend to bring to things like this, so I'm sure it'll recover. Well, that just shows how much plant knowledge we've got in the room. Well, because that's a pretty hard challenge, guys. So well done. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining me. Have we got any more questions before I go? Otherwise, I'll say thank you so much to Anne and to Tom for joining me today. And thank you to you for listening. And please do go and listen to one of my 109 episodes of On the Ledge podcast. I'd love to have you as listeners. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Well, that ended as every episode of On the Ledge podcast should, descending slowly into barely concealed chaos. Thank you so much to Tom, Hart, Dyke and Anne Swithinbank for being such good sports, and to everyone who came along to clap and support the show live. And to my sound person Lisa Hack for doing a great job on the mixing desk. Check the show notes for your chance to test out your pronunciation of those tongue twister Latin names, more information about Lullingstone Castle, Tom and Anne. That's all for this week's show. I'll be back next Friday and I do hope you'll join me then. Bye! The music you heard in this week's episode was Roll Jordan Roll by the Joy Drops and Water in the Creek by Josh Woodward, with ad music by the Heftone Banjo Orchestra with Dill Pickles. All tracks are licensed under Creative Commons. See my show notes at janeperrone.com for details.